This conference will now be recorded.
Yeah, able to see your screen.
So today we will be discussing about a Git. So what is a version control system or software change management, sorry, configuration management or source code management. Earlier they were calling it as a configuration management. Then later, since the configuration management meaning has changed a lot after many infrastructure as a code tools once they have come up. So this SCM is becoming source code management section. Then followed by version control system. What are the types or what are the tools which we have in the market? And then we'll discuss about what is a Git and going through that Git hands-on and creating GitHub account and installing the basic tools. So what is a version control system? So typically a version control system is a software where we can track our file system changes. So what exactly a file system change? So now this case, I have a documents folder and I have certificates inside that. Now this is in a PDF file, and as many of you know, we cannot edit this PDF file. Of course, we have proprietary tools to edit them, but in general, in day-to-day purpose, we don't edit the PDF files. Rather, we edit any documents like docs or TXT files or any the different formats of a file system we used to edit. For editing, let's say I have edited some particular PPT and I would like to share it to across as many as developers. In this case, this is my personal file and I don't want to distribute it to the multiple people, or I don't want to collaborate this particular change with any of the developers or my colleagues. In this particular situation, since it is only file which is a personal one, I don't need to be collaborated for this situation. But imagine a situation where we have a team of, and as many of you know, in industry we have a teams like for development we have a dedicated development teams, and for QA we have a testing teams dedicated to central QAs or a feature specific QA teams, or even in a development for every microservice there might be 2 to 3 resources, and overall a team will be around uh, 10 to 100, or sometimes based on a company size or product size there may be around 300 to 400 developers as well for a single product. So when multiple developers are working on a same this particular B80, so imagine we have 4 to 5 people who are working on this particular task, and those has to be fulfilled. The whole four or five developers has to update their code, and we need a central platform, right? So instead of I'm writing code in my local and I'm distributing to the to the people who are around the world or around the globe distributed. So I need a medium to maintain those changes. Since it is a local file, I'm just renaming it to some test presentation, and if I keep it in my local, it won't make a meaningful when you are in IT industry or when you are in a development. Uh, when you are a developer or a QA engineer or any sort of engineer, even a DevOps engineers used to write some infrastructure as a code like Ansible or Docker files, and even some situations Jenkins file. So we used to modify and we used to write our own, we used to add our own features or enhancements to the existing file system. So we don't store all our local files like a documents or a desktop or as many as folders we have. We don't version them or we don't store them in a version control system. What we do, we just store the version, we just store the code in version control system. So if you see the version control system definition, a version control system is a software that tracks the changes to a file system or set of files over the time so that you can recall a specific version later. It also allow you to work together to other programmers with other programmers. So here what exactly they are talking about a set of files over time. So and if you see some features in WhatsApp, they're adding like double checks or status optimizing or privacy concerns. There are many things they are updating day by day. And if at all they want to go back an year and of back changes, if WhatsApp or Facebook or any web application or internet-based application or even a desktop application, if they want to roll back to a particular version around 2 years or 3 years back or something, they want to check out a code and they want to look at the code which was there in a 2017 and what happened with our file system. Since this is my file system, I cannot go back to the particular version. Now, see, I just used the Control Z and it was renamed to the previous version. But what if after a year and a half, in a file system, whatever the changes we are doing, not only for this the renaming I'm talking about. So imagine I have on a Hello World Java application. This is just in a Java file. So I've removed at the rate. So I've removed at the rate now and I have saved my file and there is no possibility to recover the content whatever the content which I have modified. And if I want to add the previous content, I need to go back and I need to edit it manually. Now this case it is a single file and I know where I have modified. So imagine for a situation you have modified, you are a developer and you have modified around 10 to 20 files of a Java code, and every day you used to modify and you used to add a new code and you used to delete existing code or you used to update the existing whatever the logic which you have written. And these kind of situations, we need a medium to track each and every change. Why exactly we need to track? As I mentioned, there are situations where we need to go back to the previous versions or where we need to look for the logic which was implemented the previously. Over the time goes and when we are dealing with a file system, it won't allow to track the files. So in that situation, we have to track somewhere in our version control systems. That's where we are using version control system to track individual changes and to collaborate the developers. So these are some benefits about version control system. So it will maintain a complete change history of a single file. Not only here the meaning of a file, which is nothing but it can track the changes of each and every file and a folder which is there in our source code simultaneously working. So simultaneously working in the sense, as I mentioned, it is a distributed. So multiple developers can work independently on their local copies. And once their development is over, they can push to the remote. And If somebody wants developer A wants developer B changes, developer B can push their changes to the remote Git, and developer A can pull their changes into his local. And the traceability and a branching. So here the branching and merging strategies typically talks about that will be discussed in our coming uh, slides. So branching in depth. So here branching and merging strategies are something, as I mentioned, when the multiple developers are working and multiple code changes are happening onto a single branch or a single file system, it might be very difficult to manage or control multiple developers changes. As a DevOps or CI/CD or release engineer, we have to control all their changes. So some developer is pushing directly to some other branches, and we don't allow them to directly push. Rather, we used to request them to raise a pull request. So that will be discussed in the next sessions. And the traceability. So as I mentioned, the file system changes or any changes at any point of a time, we can trace very quickly with the help of a git log commands. There are many options for GitLab to on which user this particular has modified file has modified, or on which time this particular file was modified. And we can see anytime 1 year back or something, last December to January to December, on this particular file, what are the changes done, or something we can check like in the past 6 months, what are the developers who made a changes, who are the developers who made a changes on a particular file. So we can anytime we can get on this particular file who are the developers from past 6 months and what is the code base which they have added, and everything we can list out based on a time, based on authors, and all the history, what are the content they have added. So now you have got some understanding of why we are using version control system. So to just track the changes of our regular code base changes. Now coming to the version control system types. So as like many tools, even for version control system, we have different types of tools or procedures. So, when it comes to the VCS types, one is a centralized version control system, another one is a distributed version control system. So what exactly a centralized version control system? Nowadays, we are using only distributed version control systems, but I have worked on a subversion. A Perforce I haven't worked. SVN is a subversion, full form. I was a centralized version control system. One second. Sorry, I got a call. So, with a centralized version control system, or like a subversion, where a server will be there in some particular location, like whether it is a cloud hosted or on-premise hosted. So it is a single copy, and from there, developer one or developer two are multiple developers. So whoever are the end users of that particular hosted centralized version control system, like a subversion or Perforce. So we used to get the latest code or anything or any action which we want to perform on a SVN. We need to be connected to the internet and we need to be connected to the repository. Like how we used to connect our VPNs to communicate with our day-to-day activities or to be connected into our company network. So likewise, we need to be always connected to the centralized version control system to perform even a single commit, single code change. If you want to save, you need to be connected to the remote repository. And even if you want to create a branches, if you want to store your local changes, everything you should be connected to the remote. And without internet, you cannot perform. You can perform your local changes. Like I can save my, I can just edit my file name, and it will be saved in only not even a local SVN repository. It will just save the file. That's it. Not into remote or not into a local uh, SVN file system. So it won't do any action in a remote or even in a local. When it comes to the centralized or distributed file system or version control system, so here in a distributed version control system, typically it will just avoid the you know always connected process. We don't need to be connected to the Git or a GitHub or a GitLab. For examples of a distributed system or GitLab, GitHub, and Atlassian tool, Bitbucket, and there are some other tools, but popular one is a GitLab, Bitbucket, Bitbucket, and GitHub. Mostly we use a GitHub since it is a open source. Even GitLab is a open source, but we were habituated mostly since GitHub was the first one who implemented the who implemented the hosting service for a Git. So I'm just repeating about a distributed version control system. We here in a distributed version control system, we don't need to rely as on like centralized version control system. So we don't need to be connected to the remote to to modify your changes, to make your commits, to create your branches. Everything can be done offline. And at the end, once your changes you thought the changes were finalized, and you can directly push your changes to the remote. And from there, other developers can access their changes, your changes to their local repository. And at any point of a time, let's say imagine on remote or whatever the hosted GitHub repository was crashed, and it can be recovered with the help of any one of the developers a local copy. And when it comes to the centralized one, it is not possible because the revisions are in a global level. When it comes to the centralized version control system, it won't maintain any server in a developer machine. But when it comes to the distributed version control system, so it will maintain the whole server in the developer machine, each and every developer machine. That's where even developer can share their workspace from his local machine to the other developers workspace. If they are connected in office network or a VPN, they can directly share instead of pushing to the remote like a GitHub. Even they can share one to one. So this is a distributed one and the centralized one. Let me just give you a pictorial representation. So this is how a server looks like, a central repository, and any working copy here. Here working copy is like a developer one, developer two, developer three. So any commit or update they want to do, everything has to be connected to the internet, to the remote server. And that's what the disadvantages of a centralized version control system. One is a lack of a collaboration, or always we need to be connected to the remote system. And another one is if something goes wrong to the main server remote repository. So of course we maintain a backup strategies and everything, but uh, in worst case, the copy, or I mean the remote copy, we might incur some data loss. Why? Because I'm a developer. I have some changes in my local machine. I just pushed it recently to the remote, and once it is a lost, it won't be available for other developers. Lost in the sense once my server crashed, so it won't be available for other developers. And now let's say imagine I don't have a backup for this, and I can restore the code, but I cannot restore the history of the changes that are made on top of the particular file system or on top of my source code. So who has made changes on what file from past 5 years or 6 years? It won't maintain any history. So when it comes to the disaster recovery and all, so coming to the distributed version control system, we used to have a hosted repository, whether it is on-premise or a cloud or whoever is providing, like a GitHub or GitLab, a Bitbucket, whether they provide their cloud system or we need to depend on some AWS machine where we can install our Git and we can configure the Git server. But most of the situations, companies they used to maintain. I mean, they used to purchase the space from the GitHub or GitLab, whoever is the provider, and all the maintainability will be taken care of by service providers. So if you see there, server inside a server, I have a remote repository in distributed version control system, and a developer one or workstation one or a PC one. So when developer one clone the code from the remote repository to his local machine, that means a working copy. So when he cloned the code from the remote repository to his local machine for the first setup, let's say this guy has joined recently and he need a latest code from the remote repository, and he has cloned the code, and in his machine it will create a repository like a server which we have in a remote repository. It will create another server in his local machine so that he can work. Now we can see commits and updates, everything he can do in his local machine. Or there are many, not only commits. He can create a branches and he can do the rebases, or he can amend the changes or changing the commit histories and everything he can do from his local. And once everything is done, he can directly connect to the remote repository. He can push their changes if you want. If he want get the latest changes, he can pull out the changes to his local repository, and from there it will be reflected to his working copy. So that is how each and every developer can work on their local version control system. So this is about the distributed version control system. So yeah, coming to the Git. So we were talking about Git distributed distributed version control system. So Git also falls under Git distributed version control system. So when it comes to the Git, it is an open source, and it can handle the large file system to a small file system. So what I exactly meant by that? There are situations where we need to store our mp3 files. Let's say my situation, my web application is having some mini videos, like a streaming website, and I need to store my videos in somewhere in a version control system. Usually we don't save those, I mean, streaming kind of applications. They used to maintain a data in a different formats, but I'm just giving you an example. Otherwise I will just give you an example. um yeah. So when I was with HP, where we used to build HPX OS, not HPX, yes, HPX OS, and there is another tool, RMC, Recovery Management Central. What exactly that will do? We have a physical servers. I've shown you that in while we were discussing about a Linux session. So we have a physical servers. When physical server goes down, I mean, the physical hardware goes down and it was crashed. And once it is up, we need to recover the data inside that. for recovering the data for every hardware providers, or HP or IBM or Oracle or Dell EMC, whoever is providing the hardware, they have their own enterprise proprietary softwares to recover the data which was lost on the device. So for that, they have a softwares, and whenever they are building the softwares, and they used to bundle it with the operating system. So what exactly they are bundling inside the operating system? My application, which recovers the data from the hardware when hardware goes down, or when my system crashed. In that situations, we need a software, and the software has a bundle including inside our operating system. Even in a lighter note or a example of our regular Windows-based operating system, whenever we bought a new laptop, we used to get Windows, Microsoft apps, most of the Edge and Internet Explorer. They were bundled with our operating system. Imagine how operating system was built inside a Microsoft. And one image of an operating system is around 4 gigabytes to 8 gigabytes. So, and when the developers are working on their local machine, when the code is stored on a remote Git repository, it will be around 10 GB or 20 GB or 50 GB, 100 gigs of a data for a single repository. To maintain those large file systems, it is very easy when it comes to Git. So yeah, and we might be aware of who are already working. They might know what is a GitLab and GitHub. So I was talking about a Git. So Git is a distributed version control system, and when it comes to GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket, these are hosting services for a Git. What is exactly hosting service? Let me just go back. Now I'm in my workspace training and a Git folder. I have only hello world folder. Now I'm creating one directory with a name local Git. So I'm inside my Git. I am initiating a server, Git server, in my repository, in my local. And if you see, I have used a git init. Git init is a command to initiate a Git server in your local file system. So where it will initiate the file system or a Git server in my local Git folder. So wherever you are in, whenever you are trying to use a Git init, it will start the server in the same folder. So please be make sure that don't do git init anywhere wherever you want. So create a proper folders while practicing and use git init there in a respective folders. And anytime if you are not sure where I have initiated my git repo in my local, and you can see here till here, you can see the local git is my folder followed by the command. Now we can see once I have initiated, we have got some master here. So this is a git branch by default. So whenever you clone the code or whenever you initialize an empty repository in your local machine, this is a default one, the default branch that Git will create for us. So now I have initiated my Git repo. How do we know that this is my Git repo? I'm just listing down ls-lrt. I have a 0 folders now. I'm using A, and I can see there is a .git folder. So this is a Git server a .git folder is a server. It will save all the changes. Like as I mentioned, Git is a distributed one and it has multiple branches. And even for centralized version control system, we have a branching model. But when it comes to the Git, we used to have as many as branches. It is just an pointer reference for branch to branch. It will just save if we have 1,000 branches or 2,000 branches. That doesn't mean that, let's say, on my master, I have a 1 GB file. Not only file, I'm talking about whole file system size. I have a source code size of a 1 GB and I have created 1,000 branches. I mean, 1,000. Let me create a sample file or cp dot, and I'm copying hello world file to my local Git server. I'm just checking what is the status of my file. So I have newly added this particular hello world.java, and now I'm checking what is the status of my particular file which I have added recently. It is showing you are on a master branch and there are no commits. And let me just list out.
Rajendra,
Yeah,
hello. Do you
yeah,
have
I can hear
using
you. Hello.
to Git Bash? Yeah. Do you using to Putty tool or Git Bash tool?
So I'm not using any one of them since I'm using a Mac. So it has a by default Mac Git installed in my machine. So I can directly use through terminal. I'm using item. So item
Okay.
is an kind of terminal. We have two types of terminals, right? Not only two. So by default, we used to have a. So this is my terminal. The regular, like you have in Windows, CMD prompt, command prompt. In Linux or Ubuntu, we call them as a terminal. Even in Windows, we can call that as a terminal. But mostly we used to habituated with a command prompt or a CMD. Okay.
Okay.
And yeah, your doubt is about whether we are using a putty or a Git bash, right? See, putty is a just
Right.
SSH client. It is just
Okay.
an SSH client. What is the exact purpose of this? To connect to a remote machine. Example, EC2 machine. That's it. So once you have connected there, that means you have connected to the remote machine. You can do Git operations, anything in putty. That doesn't mean that uh, Git is or putty is supporting a Git. It doesn't mean that a putty is supporting a Git. So rather, what exactly that is happening? You're connecting to the remote machine shell and you are executing every commands in an EC2 machine. If you see there, once you have connected to the remote machine and you will be, your workspace or present working directory, everything will be changed, right? That means you are executing the commands from your local machine to the remote machine by connecting via SSH client. So SSH putty is just an SSH client. Like we have a GitHub, not a GitHub, like we have a Git bash. Once if you have Git bash installed, you can utilize any sort of a Git related commands inside your Git bash, not on a SSH. So if you want to do not on a putty. If you want to do any sort of a Git related commands in your local, you should use Git bash, or you have to depend on some other tools. There is other tools like a GitHub desktop, and even when you install a Git directly in your local machine, it will enable for you to directly utilize your Git commands in your mesh. Ritvik, right?
Thank you.
Who's asking? Satya. Okay. So, yes, Satya. Have you installed Git Bash in your local?
Yes, I am. I am using to command line.
So, regular CMD, Windows-based CMD.
Yes, regular CMD.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. So it clarifies you, right?
Right.
So now I'm in my local workspace, local Git server. So there are no other branches. That's why it is showing nothing. Now I have only master branch. Since I have checked after adding my new file, I haven't added. I just copied to my Git server location, and I need to instruct my server the modifications or new file additions, anything. It won't take simply when you copy from X location to the Git server location. It won't consider, Git doesn't consider by default whether this is a Git file system or not. So it will just ignore whenever you copy any file. I'm in a local Git folder and I'm just displaying. I have only one folder, one file now, which is a hello world Java. And anytime if you want to add your file or newly added file or your modifications to the existing file, you need to add this file to the GitHub, Git server staging area. So what exactly meant by that? On a master branch, we have a nothing commits, and it is clearly showing untracked files. Use git add and followed by the file to include into committed. I'm adding the newly added file. Let me check the status. Now we can see the difference even in a color. It was untracked or unadded to my staging area, and now we can see new file has been added. So changes to be committed. That means these are below changes that we can commit to our staging area, to our Git repository or Git server. Since in a diagram, so whenever we initiate a repository or whenever we clone the repository from the remote machine, it will create a local repository for us. And on the local repository, we used to update or we used to commit and we used to stage our changes. That means into our .git server. .git is in a folder by default whenever you clone or whenever you initiate an empty repo. And you can see the objects, how it will store, and indexes and configs. So these are our default configurations. So whenever we add our remote repository, because now it is just a local server, I haven't configured and I haven't cloned anything from the remote repository. So this is available only for my particular machine. So if at all I want to make it available, I need to push it to the remote machine or something directly to the GitHub. So I was talking about a
Rajendra,
GitHub. Yeah, please.
for for few of the folders it is showing different color. Why? Objects, refs,
Here,
hooks.
yeah, this is a folder and this is a file. This
Okay,
head and all files. Description is a file. Info is a folder.
okay, okay.
So you might don't get these colors in your machine because this is my terminal and ZSH is my shell. So this is a based on shell as well. So which shell we are using? I'm using a bin GSH. For a bin bash, there might be different colors, but the differentiation we can easily find out. Color may be different, but the files to directory. The only difference is one is a file and another one is a directory. And you can see here also the file system is a directory. That's where the color also.
Okay.
Yeah, so I was talking about hosting services, GitLab and Bitbucket and GitHub. Either GitLab or a Bitbucket or GitHub. So those are just a hosting services. And I was going through this example to show you how, you know, without a hosting service and with hosting service. Now I can make my copy to be available for other developers from directly, after installing Git inside EC2 machine, I can make it available for other users. But they don't get the UI or they don't get the collaboration in easier way. What I exactly meant by that? Even though once we have a set up your own Git server in EC2 machine without depending on hosting services like GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket, so it is just nothing. We have to communicate, we have to collaborate through the command line only. So since Git doesn't have any UI mode, we have to depend on some hosting services like Bitbucket, GitLab. So those are providers, popular providers. What I exactly meant by this? We have a github.com where we can host our new sorry, where we can host our repositories. What I exactly meant by that? One second, I'm just coming back. In any of the hosting services like a GitHub, Bitbucket, or GitLab, we can maintain our own organizations. So it means we can create your organization and we can maintain your organizations. Example, now you have gotten a new company. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, sorry, I lost the connectivity. Yeah, so you're able to see my screen, right?
Yeah.
Let me stop and share again. Sorry for the inconvenience. So here is my organizations. So in general, in a real time, we used to create a multiple organizations based on whether client or based on a business units which we have, or based on inside a business units, there might be a different departments. For every department, we used to create a one organization, and inside that particular department, we can maintain our multiple projects or multiple products related source code. And here is an plan it is suggesting for us if you want to collaborate with more people. and for storing and the backups, and 300 minutes of automation, and the storage now we can see 500 GB, 50 GB of package storage. A package storage in the sense, even we can store our build artifacts to the GitHub repository as well, but that will be discussed later. So everyone please create a GitHub account so that we'll collaborate in the coming days. We'll try to create a one repository in central, and we will work together. So unlimited public and private repositories, 200 automation machines, packages, issues, data. So I'm creating a new organization.
So to access this organization, we have to create GitHub account.
Not to access this organization. So when you create your own GitHub account, it will give you all these options which you can see on my screen. So, and in other way, I can create my organization, or else I have my own organizations. Earlier I have created. This is my personal account. So with this organization, let's say Goodwill is my one of the repo, one of the organization. Inside my Goodwill, view organization option and browse organization repositories. I'm going through the browse organization. So these are repos way back I have created, and this is an just empty repository which I have created earlier. So in my account, I have a multiple organizations which I was created earlier. And this case, I want to invite somebody into my organization, and I can directly invite into my project collaborations. Let me just update my local copy to the remote. And once I have updated my code, so I will add all of your emails to collaborate into this particular empty repository so that everybody can collaborate from their local machines. And this is a website, github.com. So please create an account. It is a free, and you can start creating your own organizations there. And inside an organization, we can maintain a multiple GitHub repositories. What exactly meant by that? So now I have local Git repository I have initiated. Likewise, you can initiate, or you can create a local Git repository, or whatever with your naming convention. You can create a number of repositories there in your organization. The organization name will be unique throughout the globe. So that's where it is not accepting like a training. I'm just giving a random numbers. Now it is started accepting, like we used to have insta tags and all. So it is a unique throughout the globe. So it's a unique name that we have to give. And example, like for organizations, they used to maintain labs, lab names, and they have a storage lab, and they used to create with that. And email is a maintainer email or admin email. In general, in organizations, we don't give the personal or respective lead or manager's email. So rather, we used to maintain a group email IDs, or admin email or service account emails, which we used to create it. And now this case, since it is my personal, and once I've created organization, it is asking me add organization numbers. Let me just quickly go back and add you guys. You will get invitation to your Gmail so that you will be part of my newly created organization. And even you can create your own organizations. So it is just taking a survey for which the particular repository or organization which we are going to create. So this can be optional, anything you can provide. If you have any existing repository somewhere in other locations, while creating organization, we can import the code as well, or if you have in local. Since I have a local repository in my machine, let me just try to upload. I haven't tried this option. It is new feature. Let's just give it a try. And now I have saved my file into my local staging area with the git add option. Somewhere I have used a git add. Git add hello world. And once I have added my changes, I need to commit the changes. Now it is added to the staging area, and from the staging area to the Git server. Git server in the sense local copy. From my working copy, I have added a new file, and from this I need to add it to the Git repository, the local Git server location, and so that it will be tracked in further changes. For adding that, if you want, git commit -m. M is a message. Message is a mandatory. Whenever you are committing any changes to the Git server, the message is a mandatory, because if we don't give any messages, or if we don't give any meaningful messages while committing your change, it won't allow if you forgot to give -m option. And anyway, the meaningful message option, it will allow if you give even any random message, it will allow to commit. All Git is looking for a message for the particular commit. Why exactly we need to give the message? Yeah, as we have discussed, if you want to look back on a particular file, on this particular hello world, and I just want to list out what are the commits happened from past 1 year. I'm looking at once we looking at the previous 20 commits or 30 commits or year commits back, and it will just list out only commit names for a first time. So by default, only by the commit names, uh, let's say for an year and a half back, I have added one SSL certificate into my code, or one logic which is related to the customer angel broker. So for that particular customer, if I give a meaningful commit message here, I can directly figure it out. Hey, on this particular commit, yeah, I remember this. Or if the developer was not there in our organization as well, it is very easy to find out on a particular file system or on a particular file on a particular commit with a meaningful message. What are the content that modified inside this particular commit? We get to know by looking at the commit message itself. And it is showing author identity is unknown. Since I haven't set up any author identity here, it is showing that. What is that exactly mean by that? Just now we have discussed, and anytime I'm committing, and Git should know that who is committing. I know that I'm using my local machine and I'm Rajendra, I'm committing the change. But how do Git knows that this particular is trying to commit? So that's where we need to set up whenever we install a git bash, and the first thing we have to do git config global and user, and followed by user email and username. So one is a username and another one is a user email. Let me configure the same now. So now you can see the list of the configurations or users with the same command by providing hyphen hyphen list, and it will be you know prompt you in this particular vi mode, and you can come back with the same command escape or a quit hyphen q. Most of the times if you are stuck inside somewhere, try to use a q or control c. And let me check anything has changed inside my config. So nothing has changed since there is no change, and indexes hooks and everything is fine. Now I'm looking for status. Since I have committed, git status. I haven't committed. If you see, there is no commit site because it was thrown an error while I'm committing. And 1 second. Yeah. So it was not taken any commits from the previous executed command since I haven't configured my user. So now I'm trying to commit. If you see, now it has created a root commit, the initial commit, which is a hello world file added, one file changes, and seven insertions. The insertions is nothing but inside a file, the content, it is in a create mode. Since it is a new file, it was in a create mode. If something I have modified an existing file, it would be a modified mode. So I'm taking initial commit now. I'm just updating initial commit message. Let me check the status. Since I have modified, I have staged my file and I have added my file into Git server. And after that, I have modified. I have added a new content. Now we can see when I check anytime if you are in a confusion state, what exactly state of your Git copy or Git server or local your workspace, the status Git status is an option to check what is the present state of your Git repository or Git server. And now it is showing modified this particular hello world.java file. What I need to do again, I need to add, or again I need to commit. Both can be achieved in a single message, single line. Earlier, if you remember, I have added git add followed by the file name, and I have used the commit message. The later I've used git commit. So earlier this command I have used for adding my particular file into my staging area. Now I don't want to use every time the same process, every time I'm adding a new file. Every time whenever I do the modification, I don't want to use the two commands for adding one command for committing another command. Since it is already existing file, I can use -a and m followed by the message. So I'm updating, since we have updated a print statement, I'm just updating the commit message. -a for adding, -m for a commit message. So for older gate, it was accepting unknown option -a hyphen. Yeah. So I haven't specified whether I'm adding or committing. Git commit -am. So it is just throwing unknown option, because for Git I'm just passing an option. Instead of an option, I need to pass an argument. Argument is something git commit. So git commit, for git commit I'm passing an argument -am option. For commit I'm passing -am. So it will add the file into the staging area and it will commit the changes into my Git server, local Git server. Now we can see master, it has created one Git commit with message and followed by how many files we have changed in this particular commit. If I have two files or three files modified, it will just list out three files changed. And if I deleted any file in a particular commit, it will display the one deletion, one file deletion. Now this case, one insertion happened and one deletion happened. One deletion in the sense whenever we are updating a content of any file, it will remove the spaces, right? So this is an empty space, imagine. And if I add any new commit here for another 10 words or 15 words, it will treat like a one deletion. And let me just use a git log. Since I've mentioned it, at any point of a time, if you want to look at the history of a file, and we can see with the help of a git log, there are many more options that we will discuss in a tomorrow session in depth, when we try to collaborate and when we try to raise a pull request and working on a multiple branches, so that we get a lot more commits, and those commits we can see with the help of multiple options based on a author, based on dates between the commits, all those stuff. Now if you see, the first commit which I have committed was a hello world file added, and the latest commit is showing updated println message with initial commit. And now my head is on a master. What I exactly meant by this? So head is nothing but it is also a pointer or address location where it is pointing to the latest master. So this particular commit is up to date with my master, since I have added my file into Git staging area. Then I have committed my changes to the Git staging area. So I'm just coming back from the log. Now Git status. So nothing is there to commit since I have already committed. So everything is clean in my workspace. So let me just copy from my local storage, whether it allow or not. We'll see. Have any public repository set? Okay. And once you have added once you have accepted my invitation, I can see your names here in members section, and I can control the user access privileges and everything. And even I can cancel the invitation and I can invite more people. And let me just go back. The user management, we can do it in people section, and the project related settings, and the restriction part and all. Once you have accepted my invitation, once we started practicing some commands and project related stuff, we'll get to know how we can restrict a particular user to commit onto only these particular branches, or how we can restrict other users not to clone or not to write into a particular branches. Those things will be discussed in next sections once you have set up all your local environment. It is asking whether you want to initialize whenever you are initiating a new repository. Let me check. There is another option, import from the public repo. No, since it is not a public repo, we cannot import. What exactly I'm trying to talking about? Import option. So it is giving you an option like if you want to migrate from Bitbucket to the GitHub or GitLab to the GitHub, they're providing a provision to directly import with the help of their URLs. We have to provide the project URL, Git URL, repository URL, the project URL or a Git URL or repository URL, all are the same terminology. So we need to provide that and the repository name that I'm going to create a newly here, and I can start importing that. So earlier the migration was a bit difficult. There are no features, default features to import all this stuff. So what we used to do, we used to clone all the latest code, and we used to take a downtime, and we used to block the developers to commit the changes, and sometimes we used to work on a weekends for a migration part. And now here we can see directly from URL to URL, it is giving an option to import. So I mean, I don't want to initialize any file since I have files in my local. I'm not choosing any license since it is just a practicing purpose. If companies they are creating, if they have any licenses, they used to upload the licenses section. But even a companies, I didn't find any licenses that my companies have uploaded so far. If you're providing like you might have heard about the open source, right? For open source, you will be seeing some MIT licenses every time in GitLab. So that is a for open source. The companies use they used to create a private repositories, not a public one. They used to create a private repositories so that it will be inside their members or employees or teams. So I've created a new repository, Hello World, inside my organization, Rajendra Collab. So the organization I have created inside my organization, we can create any number of repositories inside an organization. So I have multiple organizations under my name. So Goodwill, RPCYN, Prakriti, and Rajendra Collab, which I have created now. Inside a Rajendra Collab, I have only Hello World, one repo, which I have created 31 seconds ago. And now, whenever you create an empty repository in a remote, and you can see there is nothing, rather it is just giving a readme or instructions how you can proceed further. And here it is showing access to the people you want to work, the user management, and a quick setup. You can set up your desktop, I mean, by installing the respective the clients. In this case, client is a Git bash, which we mostly use. Once you have installed a Git bash, you can access a Git from anywhere in your machine. Like if you are using a Visual Studio Code or something, any other IDE that you wanted to. If you have done this kind of a things, okay. So here in a Git, every time when a CI/CD things are happening or you're configuring, we need to take it. If you want to clone the code, that is in the two forms. One is a HTTPS and another one is SSH. So for HTTPS, URL will be so Visual Studio Code is an open source IDE for editing or modifying or any sort of automation code if you want to write. IDE is nothing but an integrated development environment. So instead of writing your code in VI editor, so every time I'm using a VI editor to do any modifications to this hello world.java or something even earlier for modifying some shell script files or the basic things, I'm completely depending on VI editor and I should be aware of all these shortcuts and this stuff. But in general, we can use IDE, which developers use for coding and their regular development activities.
So after opening this Visual Studio Code, you have selected Git option.
Not a Git option. So I just imported my existing folder. So if you see here in my user home, training is a folder, and under training I have a Git folder. I have imported that Git folder, and inside my Git
Okay.
dot. So inside my Git, here is a Git folder. I have two folders. One is a hello world and the local Git. So those two folders has come down here since I have imported till Git. So if you want to import, and you can import directly from the training folder. So you can see all these folders as well: commands, shell script, AWS, softwares. So all the stuff we can see there. But for now, since I want to modify my files, so I've just imported a Git folder. So anything I can modify directly here.
Rajendra,
Yes.
hello. Which version of
Yeah.
using VS Code?
VS.
Visual Studio. Which version of Visual Studio? 2022 or
Uh,
2019?
no, this is not a Visual Studio. This is a Visual Studio Code, open source one.
Okay. Which
So
version?
there is a difference, right? Version, you
Okay.
can download the latest one. I don't remember the version about Visual Studio. 1 second. It's a 1.642 universal.
This version is a 2019,
No, in your case, Visual Studio 2019 is something. It is an enterprise version, right?
right?
Enterprise are student versions. That is a full-fledged version where which developers will be used for debugging, for uh, uh, importing a new project. So for their regular development activities, they use full version of Visual Studio. So Visual Studio is a different. Visual Studio 2019, 2022, that is a different, and Visual Studio Code is a different. So code is a very Visual Studio Code is also an open source, and it is a very lightweight, and it will be used a wide variety of the teams, like testing teams they used to do. And as a DevOps engineer or a CI/CD engineer, we don't need to be installed around what is that Visual Studio 2019 or 2020 or 2022. So if I want to install that, that will be around 1 GB of a package, or 800 MB minimum of a package I need to install, and it will import many of the modules and dependency tools. And I don't want all of that, and it will slow down my machine because my functioning is only, I don't want to write a .NET code, and I don't want to write any Java code, and I just want to modify my basic automation. Could you please make it a mute? Yeah, thank you. So, so I just want to do a regular, like writing a shell script or modifying a shell script, or writing Ansible scripts, or modifying my existing Jenkins pipelines. For that purpose, I don't want to install a full-fledged IDE like a Netflix, JetBrains, and Eclipse. There are some other IDEs which developers they use. That is a heavy weight actually to maintain multiple projects, and to maintain the project settings and all of that. But here we don't need to be aware of the full-fledged version of IDE. So we can use this open source Visual Studio Code, or we have some other tools like Sublime Text, PyCharm, yeah, and Atom. Atom also widely used tool. Atom and Sublime Text. So earlier I used to work on Atom for my regular activities. So now in a hello world, I'm saving the file, and I have already saved, and I'm just coming back. since I've created an empty repository. What I'm trying to do here, I'm just explaining about what is a Git itself, and when it comes to Git plus GitHub. So GitHub is an hosting service where we can host my Git repositories. So here I can create a Git server or Git repository from the browser itself or directly from my local itself. What I'm trying to do here, I have initiated an empty repository in my local, that is inside my local Git folder. I have added a new file and I have committed two commits in my master branch. And what I'm trying to do, I want my particular newly created local Git server or Git repository to be available in a public. So I'm hosting my Git repository inside a Git hosting service, which is a GitHub. Or sometime if I wanted to host in GitLab or a Bitbucket, I can do the same process. So remember that whether you are using a GitLab or a Bitbucket or GitHub, so the Git commands are the same. What exactly that? Imagine this: git remote add, git branch -m, git push. These commands are everywhere. It is the same since Git is in a distributed version control system, and the commands whichever we are using on any system, whether it is GitLab or Bitbucket, tomorrow some different company is providing a hosting service. And even Azure has a Azure repos, but inside Azure repos, they are using a Git. They're just hosting, they're just wrapping up uh, a simple UI or a user understandable UI and better user management or administration of projects or creating organizations, and all those stuff will be handled by hosting service GitHub. But internally it is a Git. So Git commands are the same across any platform and any hosting service provider. On top of that, they used to have a multiple additional features like in settings and inside security, wiki pages. All those stuff will be vary from GitLab to Bitbucket, Bitbucket to different GitHub. So it will be vary, but the internal process, the storing process and committing the changes and creating a branches and collaborating and adding remotes, everything is common. Yeah. So now if you see here, it is suggesting if you want to create your local repository, new repository from the command line, it is suggesting to initialize a new repository and adding a new file. Earlier they have created a readme file there, and then followed by they have committed like whatever we have done. It will give a suggestion. So what needs to be done, and they are adding the remote. They have created a new branch there, main. Now this case we have done all of the above steps, and here is our newly our option. Since we have already created all of this, we have followed all of this, and now we can see push an existing repository from the command line. That means it is suggesting to push my local repository, the local git repository. Before that, let me just list out git remote -v. What is this particular git remote -v option is talking about? Anytime you're not sure from which repository you have cloned the code. That means if you see here, it is clearly showing HTTPS GitHub Rajendra collab is my organization. Inside that, hello world is my repository. This is my organization. This is my repository. So always repository ends with .git. So this case hello world.git is my repository which I have created. And if at all I want to add my local repository to the remote, I'm telling my Git server, hey Git, please add my remote URL as this particular one. And now let me use the git remote option. Now you can see, now you are sure that my origin is Rajendra collab and hello world.git. So every modification in my local Git server I do, it will save in my staging area, and from the staging area, once I commit my changes, it will move to the Git. So from my staging, it will move to my local Git repository once I committed. From the committed code, from the commits, if you want to make it available to the multiple users in your organization or your colleagues in your organization, you have to push your changes to the central repository or main repository. Now, let me just go back to the repo which we have created. So let me just push my changes directly instead of creating a new branch, because by default I'm already in a master. Git push origin. Let me just use only origin. So when I use the origin, it doesn't know what is the origin branch. So it is clearly showing git push to set upstream origin as a master branch. Since there is no branches or there is no content inside my code repo, we need to specify. 1 second, yeah. So there is no branches. It is suggesting us to create a new branch, and we need to push it to that particular branch. Since I have already branch which is existed, I'm using, I'm setting up my upstream branch so that whenever I use a git push, so what exactly git push will do, it will push our local commits from our local git server to the target git remote. That means to the GitHub repository. Before that, let me just check the status of my local Git workspace. So just remember this workspace and working copy. A workspace can have multiple working copies. When it comes to the working copy is a single repo. In my case, in our case, right now I'm in a local Git repo or a local Git folder. This is my working copy, and I can imagine that Git is my workspace. Inside my workspace, there are multiple. Hello world is a one repository, and local Git is another repository. So this is about workspace and working copy. This is just a terminology. Workspace can have a multiple working copies, and working copy is something, a single repository we can call a working copy. Sometimes people used to call the working copy also workspace. That's so fine. That is just a terminology. Now coming back to the Git again. So I'm trying to set my upstream branch from where it has to push, because you see there git push, I have specified origin. It doesn't know what is the origin. So I'm setting up my origin is master, and it is asking the username. strange. I've forgotten my user and password. So what if at all I want to set up? Let me log in once again. So supported password authentication is removed on. Please use a personal token. Oh God. So what it is trying to say on 13th August 2021 they have removed authenticating with a password. So they're suggesting us to create a personal authentication token. So what exactly by this personal authentication token? Not only for a Git. So these particular auth tokens were started using widely from a recent past. So instead of highlighting our password in somewhere, let's say in a Jenkins, I'm building or I'm cloning my code for just to create a build and a package out of it. And once the package is ready, I need to deploy it. For deploying, I need a machine details or machine credentials. So all these are confidential information earlier, which we used to save in directly in code repositories or something directly in somewhere in a flat files or a text files. So nowadays, uh, the organizations and the individual tools, let's say this case GitHub, they're coming up with the feature personal access tokens. With a personal access token, it is an encrypted format of a key where you can authenticate without entering your password. Let's just configure it out where we can. One second. Guys, just 1 minute. Oh yeah, sorry guys. So now you're able to see my screen, right?
Yes.
Yep. Thank you. So now we are setting up a personal access token. So as I mentioned, for authenticating or cloning a code, we have two mechanisms. One is through SSH, and another one is through HTTPS. And I will show you the URLs. And let me set up SSH first, and after that we will create a personal access token. So I'm generating my SSH keys. Actually, I have some personal and private keys which I have already generated. So let me just list out the newly created SSH key. So creating SSH keys in a Linux is something. It is a mandatory for every machine. The authentication, most of the situations in a Linux will happen through SSH keys instead of providing a password where we can communicate through one machine to another machine with the help of SSH keys. For example, how we used to communicate with our EC2 machine with the help of a PIM key. So there is no password we are giving, and there is no username we are giving. So we are just giving uh, the PIM key file. So with the help of PIM key, it will authenticate the target machine. So once you have logged into the EC2 machine, and if you want to connect to your another machines like a database servers and some other web servers and some other microservices servers which we have hosted, or there are many EC2 compute engines, right? Or even in on-premise, to connect to one server to another server. So we mostly dependent on SSH or passwordless authentication. So if you want to connect to server one to server two, entering password every time, instead of entering the password every time, we can make it a passwordless SSH. That doesn't mean that anybody can SSH to that machine. So rather, we are restricting a particular user, a particular machine. Let's say my case, UI is on a server, DB is on a server, app is on another server. These are the three EC2 machines. So from UI, I will enable to the database the SSH connection or something. From the UI, I will enable connection to the app server. From app server, it will try to connect to the DB server. So I don't want my UI server to connect directly to the database server with the help of SSH. So what I'm trying to do, I want to enable passwordless authentication only from app server to database. So my UI from my UI machine, I can directly SSH to the app server. From app server, I can do SSH to the DB server without a passwords. And these configurations will be explained when you're dealing with AWS. So when you're running with multiple services, so that is in a basic, just a brief about SSH or a passwordless authentications. So once you have generated SSH keys with the help of SSH keygen, this is a command to generate SSH keys. Even in your Git bash, you can generate SSH keys. By default, SSH keys will be stored inside your user workspace. So here my user workspace is a users or and inside that it will create .ssh folder. And in Windows Explorer, when you explore it, you cannot see directly this .ssh folder or whatever. In Windows, even in Windows or Linux, dot is a something hidden folder. So if you want to list out in Windows, you need to enable hidden folders option, but it will be visible with ls-lrta through git bash. So in git bash, you can use any Linux commands like our regular cd, ls, pwd, date, uh, the most of the Linux commands you can execute in your git bash, and you cannot execute apt-get or m commands. So those are flavor specific or operating system specific. So you cannot do those commands, but the basic commands like redirecting to one folder to another folder, vi commands, and listing out commands, and grep, egrep, and a find command, all the stuff you can do inside your git bash. But now this case I've generated SSH keys, and what I'm trying to do, let me copy my SSH public key. Instead of setting up a personal access token, so I'm just setting up my SSH keys to clone the code. We need to add RSA public key. So the above one is private key. Whenever we do SSH keygen, it will generate a two keys. One is a private and another one is a public. So this is a private key. Look like it begins with begin open SSH private key. Content will be uh, like this. So when it comes to public key, SSH public key, it would look like with my machine name @host. So you can easily find out, okay, this is my key. From my MacBook, I have generated this particular SSH public key. If I have multiple machines, I can easily understand by looking at this particular, the last word, or the last string, my username and host name. Host name will be different. Let's say my username may be same across my multiple machines, but host name will be vary. Host name is something that we can get directly with hostname command. Hostname. So for you it will work from a git bash. 1 second. Maybe for a host name Mac there will be a different command. Yeah. Okay, sorry, it was a spell wrong. So I can see my host name blrmpels, and I'm copying my newly created SSH key. Now if you see here, I'm copying my key there, adding my SSH key. And let me just go back to my organization. So why I'm adding for authenticating, I'm adding my particular newly generated SSH keys. Why do we need to authenticate? To clone any repository, we need to clone, not only clone, we can clone without authenticating since it is a public repository. But if you want to contribute to this particular GitHub repository, we need to be authenticated. We should have a privileges to do any action inside this. So if you see here, the commands were changed, not a command, the URL. If I select HTTPS, the URL is the https github.com something, and when it comes to SSH, the command is different. Now I'm updating, instead of HTTPS, I'm going with HTTP, sorry, SSH. Let me check what is my current remote URL. So my current remote URL is a HTTPS for fetching and for pushing. For fetching in the sense to get remote changes. That means in your repository, if some random developer has updated his code and you want to get those changes, you need to fetch those changes. So for fetching, I have HTTP URL, and pushing in the sense your local modified changes that now we are trying to push to the remote. So for pushing also the same URL. Always it would be same. So I'm gonna say okay, already upstream was set up. Git remote add origin followed by not a HTTP again. How it was selected. I'm selecting SSH URL. So it is showing it is already added. So for updating or modifying, there would be a command. So instead of a command, I'm just looking for in configuration anywhere whether we can modify the file. Okay. So what I'm trying to do in .git folder, there is a config file. So in that, I'm just modifying. So I'm so I'm modifying with SSH URL. This is SSH URL. So earlier it is HTTPS. Let me use git remote -v, and it is updated with Git URL, but I'm not sure whether it will accept or not. Let's check that. So since it is the first time it is connecting to my GitHub from this laptop, it is asking to save the fingerprint. Now, if we see, so enumerating objects, counting objects, and delta comparison. So here it is writing objects into the remote. That means by this time, we can find out our inside our hello world Git. We can see our hello world Java file in a master branch. I just refreshed the page, and 1 hour back I have committed our Git into this particular file, and by default we have a one default branch which is a master, and from our local we have got all the changes to the remote with the help of git push origin master. So I'm pushing my changes to the origin master, and all the changes were reflected here. So what we have done, we have created an empty repository in GitHub, and for that empty repository I was having already local git folder, I mean local git folder which I have created, and inside this I have initialized an empty git repository. And after my changes I have added, that means the hello world Java file I have added. From that I have uploaded my, I have pushed my changes to the remote. So my changes were reflected to this particular remote repository. Let me just create a new branch, and we were talking about a branches, right? So from the branches and all I will explain even in a tomorrow session. So for this okay, anyway, since it is 10:30, let's close it and sum it up. So we have just given an overview of what is a Git and what is a version control systems, and what are the types of version control systems, like a centralized and distributed version control systems, and then followed by the what are the benefits of that, and what are the different kinds like a subversion and a perforce that fall under centralized version control system when it comes to Git and Mercurial. Mercurial we don't use very often, so those are legacy things, and mostly 90% of the situations in DevOps world are CI/CD things. Everybody using a Git now, and there are many less situations where people are using Subversion still, and the centralized versus the distributed system, how it works in a real time. When it is centralized is always connected, and distributed is everybody can work independently on their local machines. And about a Git, and followed by the GitHub hosting services. So either GitHub or GitLab or Bitbucket. So those are just hosting services for our Git. Yeah, this is just overview, and the things you need to set up: Git Bash installation, GitHub account. So these things are mandatory. even for any other sessions, if you want to store, if you want to practice your things, uh, just to create a GitHub account today, and let's create, by going through the video, or you just create your own organization, and create your own a new repository with the help of any text file or any default readme file. So you don't need to be created from the command line like we have done now. Rather, what we can do, let me create a new repository. March 12, I'm initializing an empty repository with a readme file like we have done for the same. And now it has initialized the default one. But earlier we haven't selected anything. Now this case I'm selecting git ssh. So now everybody please set up ssh process. So tomorrow we will discuss about authentication process with a personal access token. And now don't clone your other repositories in a current repo like a git clone. If I do the git clone here, it will create another git folder inside my git because I'm already in git of another repository which is a local git. And if at all you want to make, you have to copy inside your workspace, not in a working copy. Working copy is dedicated for this particular uh, project, and you have to clone into a different location. Please make a folder git. Inside that you can maintain a multiple. So now I have cloned git clone with a March 12 repo. So just now I have created a March 12 repo. Let me check what is there inside March 12. So now it is displaying main branch. GitHub has recently changed the naming conventions. So most of 90% of the industry, 99% of the GitHub repos by default in organizations which are having a master branch. Recently they have renamed it to the main branch. Since they have renamed to main branch, that doesn't mean that organizations also by default they will convert the naming convention to the main branch. The name is main, so still they follow the master branch. Here I have a README file. So, and you can see now this case I haven't initialized any new repository. Rather, what I have done, I have created an empty repository in remote. So two ways of accessing a Git repos is, one is, once first we can create a Git remote repository, an empty repository, and you can clone that repository. The first way is create an empty repository in a remote and you can clone the repository, and now you have got an empty repo. So what are the situations where we have to create our empty repositories? So when new project is onboarding or something, when new microservice is getting onboarded, the developers or their team leads, they used to request us to create a new repository. So what we will do, we will ask them, hey, whether you have a existing code, or you want to start from the scratch. If they have existing code in their local machine, and simply they can do git init in their folder. Okay, once the git init is over, we can share our newly created empty repository. So March 12 is my new microservice or a new project which is getting onboarded. I will just share this particular URL to the respective developer. What he will do, he will just do the git init in his local code, and once a git server is initialized, he will just use git remote add command, which we have used for updating this one. He will just utilize this particular command and he will try to push the code like what we have done. So we have created a Java file, and inside the Java file we have done the modifications. So far that was not connected to the remote, and after that we have created an empty repository in GitHub, and with the empty repository I have updated my local code to the remote. That is a default process for any of an new project onboarding. And when it comes to once you have confirmed with the developers, they don't have any single piece of a code. So in that case, you can directly provide this particular URL. They will clone the code like we have done now. So I haven't initialized anything. I just cloned the empty repository. So once I have cloned, it has created a March 12 folder inside my Git workspace. So let's imagine I'm a developer. So again, the same routine process. I will add a new files, I will add a new folders, and I will make a folder structure once I have added everything. And once my basic feature testing is over, I will push my code changes to the remote GitHub repository. So this is the basic process or initial process to onboard any a new project into a Git, and user management
Uh,
and configuring.
Rajendra, uh,
Yeah, please.
from Visual Code, we can also do commit, push, and pull, right? Instead of
Yeah,
giving
exactly.
all
We
these
can do that.
commands.
Yeah, even basically we should be aware of the comments.
Okay.
Usually we don't very oftenly interact with IDEs, so we should be aware of the commands, since most of the times we were into some Linux machines somewhere. Let's say, and a situation comes in a Jenkins machine, it is unable to clone, and we have to log into the Jenkins server, and you need to give these commands for cloning, for updating, for switching between the branches, for pushing your code. So all those stuff mostly we have to do through the command line, so that we should be aware of the basic commands of cloning and creating a branches and pushing your code to the remote and updating the remote repository URLs. So all those stuff, this is the basic things we should be aware of. And yes, uh, we can do the same thing with directly with the Visual Studio Code in the form of two ways. If you have installed some default plugins, I haven't set up my Visual Studio Code for doing those stuff. Any sort of a new line, and directly I used to push from here. On the top you can see the terminal and a new terminal, and once the terminal has come, so here is my terminal. Git status. Let me just go inside a Git, local Git. I'm using Git status now. So it was modified, I haven't committed. So likewise, whatever the comment I have done there, we can achieve the same thing even with Visual Studio Code. And even we can achieve that without entering the commands. As you have mentioned, there are some plugins, and here is an option. Preview the changes. Now next to change now. Open a file, and you can see here mostly developers they use that they don't use the commands. Rather they just use stage the selected and unstage the selected one, revert the commits, and they want to commit. There are many more options, but we don't need to be aware of those things. These are IDE specific and not for CI/CD or DevOps related stuff. So what we should be aware whenever we are dealing with a Git, we should be aware of Git URLs and Git basic commands, and what are the branches, how we can switch between the master and other branches. Okay, and any doubts in setting up uh, the Git bash and creating a new account, just post in our group. so that anybody can answer. Okay. So thank you guys.
Okay.
And if you have any doubts, just make a note of it, and we will discuss that in tomorrow's session. Yeah. Thank you.